This is part 3 of our flight from Johannesburg to Cape Town. In part 2 we set up the aircraft and now we're taking off from runway 3L at Oliver Tambo Airport. At the moment I'm following the flight director, but at around 600 feet I will push the autopilot and let LNAV and VNAV take over. So let's get ready to lift up the gear. As the little green 1 approaches the little green arrow on the PFD, we'll go to flaps 1. And as it approaches the little up sign, we'll retract the flaps completely. Let's check that the engine bleeds and packs are on. Let's switch off the landing lights and let's switch off the engine start switches. And then we can do the after takeoff checklist. Now all we have to do is let LNAV and VNAV fly us to top of descent. We will monitor the legs page and we'll keep our heading bug aligned. So fast forward to the top of descent and let's pause the video and do our approach preparation. So hit the init ref button and you come to the approach page and you can see your gross weight when you're landing. You can see that I've selected flaps 30 and that my landing speed is going to be 145 knots. Next, go to the descent page and the forecast option, and you can see I've entered a transition level of 7,500 feet. I'm going to put in 2 fixes related to the CTV VOR at Cape Town Airport. The first one is a 35-degree radial and the second one is a 15 nautical mile circle around the CTV VOR. The reason for this will become evident once we get there. Air traffic has just told us to hold at ERDAS, so push the hold button, select ERDAS into the position where you want to hold. We see that it's saying it's on the 256 radial and it's a right turn hold, but when we consult the map the radial is 245. So let's change that radial to 245 and then execute. I've set nav radio 1 to the VOR and nav radio 2 to the ILS, with radio 1 has the ILS on standby. The auto brakes are armed, the courses are set in both the first officer and the captain side, and the MCP altitude has been moved down to allow us to descend. Runway elevation and runway length has been set in the HUD. Now as you can see we're entering the right hand hold based on the 245 radial. Once you've been told you can exit the hold, hit the hold button and exit hold and execute. The aircraft will take the shortest route to the ERDAS waypoint and exit the hold on the 245 radial. Okay, let's pause the video and look at our approach. We've come out of our hold at ERDAS and we're going to allow LNAV and VNAV to fly us all the way down here to this waypoint it will turn us on a 10-degree heading, and then it's going to ask for vectors. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in a 35 radial from CTV, and when we cross that 35 radial, we'll then turn onto the VOR, and we'll have our radio tuned to the CTV VOR. We'll be far enough out here. Once we're stable and locked onto that, we will change to our ILS frequency, and we'll come in onto runway 19 and make an auto land. This over here is in effect our downwind leg, and we'll start slowing down. We may get to flaps 5, and when we'll still be at 6,500 feet, and then we can turn and descend onto this ILS track. This is the ILS map, KSI 189 on a frequency of 109.1, and you can see that at 12 DME we need to be at 3,000 feet. At 8 DME we need to be at 2865 feet, and we'll lock onto the glide scope and then land on runway 189. We'll have to manage our speed and our flaps and our gear down as we come into the ILS. Here you can see that I'm getting a fuel warning, and the reason for that is that my central tank has got no fuel in it. So let's go upstairs and turn off the central fuel pumps. Here you can see that LNAV will turn us right on what is effectively our downwind leg, which is a heading of 10 degrees. At this point the FMC is still flying the aircraft. It is managing our speed, our lateral and our vertical navigation. You can see on the navigation display that the 15 DME circle from the VOR at Cape Town Airport has come into view, and you can also see the 035 radial which I have put in. So ideally the airplane would fly directly on that purple line and intersect the green 035 radial. You can see that the sim has been unable to fly the purple line accurately. So if I turn left now to intersect the ILS, I probably won't have enough time to lower my speed and get down to the correct altitude. So I'm going to have to improvise, and I'm going to wait until we get level to that intersection mark. The FMC is slowing the aircraft down and will keep us above 6,500 feet. I'm going to go on to flaps 1 now, and as the speed comes down I will go on to flaps 5, and then when we make our turn I will go on to flaps 15. I think we've gone far enough now, so I'm going to turn onto a 245 heading using heading select so that I can intercept the 189 heading at about 45 degrees. I'm also using altitude change to get us down to our intercept height of 2,700 feet. You can see that the speed bug has become active, and I'm going to have to manage the speed using the speed bug and the flaps. As we turn onto a heading of 245 to intercept our ILS and VOR, I'm going to wait until we level and stable, and then I'm going to change from heading select mode to VOR lock mode. I'm still tuned to the VOR CTV, and I'm going to allow that VOR to turn us and get us onto the right heading towards the runway. I'm still about 21 miles from the airport, so I've got plenty of time to stabilize the aircraft and to lock on to the ILS. So let's do that now. Both radios are going to be tuned to 109.1, which is the ILS frequency. It is good practice to first lock on to lateral navigation, so I'm going to push the VOR lock button. Once that is established and I've verified that I'm at a height where I can lock onto the glide scope, I'll hit the approach button. Here on the flight mode annunciator you can see that the MCP is controlling the speed. I'm locked onto the VOR, and because the glide scope is in white, we're still looking for the glide scope. Let's go upstairs again and put the landing lights on and put both starts to continuous. So here on the PFD you can see how far we are from the ILS. We're in autopilot mode. The glide scope has not been locked on. Once it is, this will turn green and this little pink diamond will come down to be level. This is our speed, this is our altitude, this is our minimums, this is our landing reference. We're going to land at a speed of 147 with flaps 30. Speaking of which, let's go to flaps 30 and let's get the gear down. Let's do the landing checklist. Both engine starts to continuous, recall check, speed brake arm, landing gear 3 greens, auto brake set, flap set, landing lights on. As we approach the glide scope, I'm going to arm the second autopilot so that we can do an auto land. Now you can see the glide scope has turned green and the little pink triangle is locked onto the glide scope. As we go through 1600 AGL, our approach is nice and stable. We're at the correct landing speed. We've got our altimeter set to local and we locked onto both lateral and vertical navigation. The runway is in sight and we have 2 reds and 2 greens, and as we come to 500 feet AGL, I'm going to pause the video and discuss a concept called the landing gate. A stable landing requires a stable approach. So what is a stable approach? At 500 feet above ground, your maximum speed should be 15 knots above your VREF. Your vertical glide path should be within 1 dot, or on the PAPIs you should see 3 reds or 3 whites. The lateral localizer should be within 1 dot. The engine thrust should be appropriate for the situation. Vertical speed should be less than 1,000 foot per minute unless it has been briefed otherwise. You can see that all those criteria have been fulfilled, and on the PFD you can see that land 3 means auto land is set, and in white on the FMA you can see that the aircraft is going to perform a rollout and flare. As we come in for the auto land, my job will be to keep the aircraft on the center line using the rudder, and then below 80 knots I will brake manually, switch off the autopilots. You'll see that the auto throttle automatically switches off. I will let the auto brakes take care of the speed up to below 80 knots, and then I'll take over manual braking, and then I'll taxi with an N1 of between 21 and 23%. As I concentrate on taxiing the aircraft, the first officer will do the after landing procedure: switch the speed brakes off, retract the flaps, auto brakes to off, switch off probe heat, and then master caution. Start the APU, both engine start switches from continuous to off, and turn the transponder from TARA to alt so that ground radar can monitor us.